Said my family was a merchant in Osaka for 6 generations, but our family lost everything in March 1945 at the end of the war.
Yes.
So we lost everything. Everything was burned. My father left the city and went to countryside, and he wanted to be a farmer. And he started to live in the countryside, and that was where I was born. But because my parents had 5 children, it's really difficult to raise 5 children in that small place. So he returned to the city and worked for a small company. And when I became a teenager, when I had to think about my future, my father said, because we lost all the wealth, property, so I was free. In Japan, I was the oldest son. In Japanese culture, traditional culture, oldest son had a responsibility to take care of family wealth and business, and take care of the parents when they become aged. But he said, my father said, I was free because I have nothing to take care of. I had to think about what I should do. And at that time, that was middle of 60s. There are so many problems within Japan and in this world. And in Japan, after World War II, Japanese people worked so hard to restore prosperity after the war. They worked so hard to make money, and I didn't like that. In the 60s, Japan become rich country, and they started to build Shinkansen, the bullet train line, and highways between Tokyo and Osaka. I lived in the city in Osaka. And before that, when I was a child, I could swim in the river, I could, play in the rice field and woods. But swimming in the river was prohibited before I became a teenager because of that pollution. So that, to me, that kind of so-called progress or development is a destruction. So I didn't like that. And also because of that economy, the Japanese school system was very competitive. So I was always asked from my parents and teachers to study hard, to go to a good school. And I didn't like competition. Around that time, I started to have a question why I have to study so hard at school, and why Japanese people have to work to make money. And that, to me, that is destruction of nature and traditional culture. That was the point. I think I was like about 15 or 16 years old, high school student. I started to read books about philosophy or novels or history, science, to understand why I have to live in this way. And the more I read books and thought, I had deeper question. What is the meaning of life? And I thought, unless we find the meaning of life, I cannot make any right decision to do in my future, for my future. I started to hate school life, studying in the school, to memorize everything and get a high mark for the examination and go to a prestigious university. I often escaped from classroom and read books in the library. And I wanted to know the meaning of life, meaning of what is happening in human society. My question become deeper and deeper, and I reached the point that I believe there's no meaning in human life, because meaning is something we create. Human life, human beings create, or in a sense produce or find. That is a kind of human reaction to the world. So, before human was appear in this world, there's no meaning. And to me, meaninglessness is more real. Meaning in human world is kind of a fiction. That is what I found. And I wanted to live being free from that kind of fictitious, human culture or civilization. Around the same time, a friend of mine, one of my classmates, had someone who practiced Zen in his family. And he stayed at a Zen temple in Kyoto. At that temple, Saoki Kodo Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi lived and practiced with lay people. And that was 1965. In that year, my teacher, Uchiyama Kosho Roshi, published his first book. And when my friend came back from that temple, he allowed me to read that book. That was the first time I encountered Buddhist teaching, Buddhist or Zen teaching, and also my teacher's way of life. And when I read the book, somehow I wanted to become his disciple. That means I wanted to live like him. I was 17. 17. Mm-hmm. He described his journey of searching the meaning. So when he was a teenager, he had the same question I had. And he studied Western philosophy at university, undergraduate and graduate school, to find what is the truth or meaning of life. And finally he found what he was looking for in Zen practice, Zen teaching. And after that, he continued to practice and share what he found with younger generations. When I read spiritual books, I knew there are such, spiritual teachers in the human history, so many of them. But he was the first actual person who lived in that way. I think that was why I wanted to live like him. After that, I studied Buddhism and Zen teaching. And I went to Komadawa University. Before that, my friend who allowed me to read Uchiyama Roshi's book died next year with cancer. He was 17. He was my classroom, so he was 17. Because he was so young, the cancer grew so quickly. So he died within a year or so. Not only about my thinking or question about life, but he showed me actual life and death in front of me. When he died, I found there's no reason he had to die. Of course, there was cause he had to die, the cancer, but I didn't think there was no reason he had to die, and I didn't need to die. That means this may happen any time to me, and I couldn't complain. From his death, I studied that, our life may end any time, so I had no time to waste. So I should go straight to what I'm looking for instead of doing something meaningless. That's why I wanted to study Buddhism. So I went to Komadawa University. That was a Soto Zen Buddhist university. And Saoki Roshi, my teacher's teacher, was a professor at the university for many years. So I knew that was the school I could study about what Uchiyama Roshi wrote. So I started to study Buddhism. I like studying Buddhism, but when I became a third grade of the university, I found that now I have to make a decision to become a Buddhist scholar or to be a monk or practitioner. And at that time, I felt, to study Buddhism through studying text and language. To be a Buddhist scholar, we have to study many languages, such as Sanskrit, Pali, Tibetan, Chinese, and we had to study 2 European languages. So my professor said, don't study Dogen, but first study language, then study the text. And I felt in order to study, and he also said, in order to become a real Buddhist scholar, I had to study, read books 10 hours a day for 10 years. And that was the starting point, not the goal. So I had to make a decision whether I want to go that way or directly practice. And I felt studying Buddhism through text is like or reading recipes with just cooking and tasting. just read and compare which recipe is better than others. But I wanted to learn how to cook and taste, and if it's possible, to share the taste to other people. I felt, to become a Buddhist scholar is not my way to go. I was 21. I asked Uchiyama Roshi to be ordained, and he accepted. So I was ordained when I was 22, December 8th, 1970. But my father and my sister attended the ceremony, even though they are not happy about my becoming a Buddhist monk. That was how I started to walk this path. When I was 17 years old, I didn't like, Japanese economy, not only Japan, but at that time, there are so many problems in the world, like Cold Wars and Vietnam Wars, and many American people, came to Asia to study Zen or Buddhism, and they became my friends. And they are looking for something alternative way of life from mass consumption, economy and politics. I found that was not my personal problem or a problem only in Japan, but Western people had the same problems. Most kind of attractive point of my teachers, Osaka Roshi and Uchiyama Roshi's way of life, is they don't care at all about money or economy, but for them to practice in poverty is important. Not only him, but in Buddhist tradition from Shakyamuni, poverty is a virtue. Poverty does not mean lack of wealth, but poverty means free from the greed, free from desire. Even though Shakyamuni was prince, he became a beggar. He gave up everything, and he walked on the street and shared what he awakened to with people in poverty. He received food from people, and that was the original Buddhist teaching. Uchiyama Roshi's life was almost the same. He lived in a small kind of a poor temple. In Japan, Buddhist temple has many family members and supported by those members. But the temple called Antaiji had no family members. That means no regular income. So Uchiyama Roshi had to support his practice by begging. Exactly same with Shakyamuni. So he did begging, in Japanese called takuhatsu, in the city of Kyoto. I was really attracted to live in that way of life. So when I became a monk and started practice at Antaiji, our practice was completely supported by begging. We didn't charge anything to the people who come to practice with us. That way of life, without thinking about income and possession, was really something attracted, me. During 5 years at Antaiji, I practiced in that way. So we had almost no personal possession at all. After 5 years, in 1975, Uchiyama Roshi, my teacher, retired. Before that, when I started to practice at Antaiji, there are many Westerners coming to practice with him, but he didn't speak any Western language. But he wanted to teach those Western people, so he asked his disciples to study English. And he asked almost all of his disciples, but only 3 of us said yes, and I was one of them. I was not really interested in studying English at all, but somehow I couldn't say no. He sent those 3 of us to English school in Osaka. So I started to study English. So when Uchiyama Roshi retired from Antaiji, he asked those 3 people to come to this country. And we bought a small piece of land in western Massachusetts. And we had nothing. We just cut the trees and built a small house, and we started to practice there. When I went there, none of us had even a driver's license. And also, we didn't have any financial support from Japan or from this country. So we had to support our life. Of course, we couldn't do begging. So we did have several odd jobs to support our life. 3 Japanese monks lived in the woods in the western Massachusetts, and we cut the trees and dig stumps and made green vegetable gardens and supported our life by doing odd jobs like picking blueberries or working for a potato farm for harvesting, or there was a tofu factory there. So we had a part-time job. We only worked few times days a week. We lived in a very poor life. I think our income, all 3 of us, was about $500 a month. That's how we lived. And we continued to practice and zazen and working on the land to make it a livable place. I spent life in that way until I became 30. That was my alternative way of life. I wanted to escape from the busy, noisy money-making machine. To me, Japanese society was one huge money-making machine, and school was a factory to produce the parts of that machine, and I escaped. And so I was really happy to live at Antaiji and live in Massachusetts in that way. So I lived in that way for about 10 years. What I was taught by my teacher was zazen, so-called Zen Buddhism, and that tradition in Japan started by Zen Master Dogen, or Dogen Zenji, and we call that tradition as Soto Zen. And the main point of Dogen's teaching was just sitting. We usually think this meditation practice is to attain some kind of enlightenment or awakening, but Dogen said we should just sit without any expectation, even enlightenment. Because we practice in order to get enlightenment, then that is desire. Desire or egocentric desire is still working there in search of truth. So from the very beginning, we just, in Dogen's expression, throw ourselves into the way without expecting any reward. That is what is called just sitting, or shikantaza in Dogen's teaching. My teacher's teacher, Sawaki Kodo Roshi, said, zazen, this sitting meditation, is good for nothing. I always said, this is good for nothing. And that is what I recommend people, and it's really difficult to encourage people to practice this way, because this is good for nothing. Zazen without expectation or without gaining mind, or zazen good for nothing, is a kind of a koan. Because even when we started to practice, we have some expectation. I think almost always because we have some problem or some difficulty or some question, we start to practice. And so without expectation, at least to find some answer to question or exit from the problem I'm facing. So without expectation or goal, we cannot start to practice. Here is a kind of a conflict. We usually call this a way-seeking mind. And without this way-seeking mind, or in Buddhist term, bodhicitta, the mind which seeks awakening, or discover the truth. We cannot start to practice. But the teaching is you should not even expect the answer. So here is a conflict. When we continue to practice, this becomes really a serious question. And sometimes we have to face the dead end. That in my case, I reached that dead end after about 10 years after I became a monk. That means, I knew, zazen is good for nothing. And I felt I was very fortunate to that teaching. That's why I started to practice in that style. So I thought I understood and I like it. Therefore, I devote my entire body and mind and time to this practice. But after 10 years, I found that was when I was in Massachusetts. We worked very hard physically. So when I became 30, my body was half broken. In my 20s, that was okay. But shortly after I became 30, my body was half broken. So, and I didn't have, income to have a treatment. So I had to return to Japan. So I couldn't practice in the way I did for 10 years. And I had a problem. I questioned, why is it a problem if zazen is good for nothing? And I looked inside of me, and I found that, my understanding of zazen is good for nothing is only understanding. But deep in my heart, I think, to practice good for nothing zazen is the most authentic practice in Buddhist tradition. That's why I'm okay. That's why my life is meaningful. I really found in deep my mind, I had expectation, and I felt my expectation was filled because of good for nothing zazen. And I had a problem when I went back to Japan. I couldn't do that anymore. And that is one thing that means that is good for nothing is only my intellectual understanding. So I devoted my entire body and mind based on my thinking. It's not really good for nothing. That is one thing I found. And another thing I found was from my childhood, I have been always good boy. When I became a teenager, I didn't like to be a good boy. To be a good boy, I think it's a difficult task. To be a good boy means I try to understand what the people around me expect from me, and I try to do the way they expect from me. So I felt that is not so honest way of life. First, I think other people's mind, and I try to follow their expectation. When I became a teenager and started to practice Zen, I felt I stopped being a good boy. I kind of betray all the expectation from my parents and teachers and Japanese society. So I felt I became a bad boy. But when I became 30, I found I was still a good boy. I wanted to be a good practitioner. I wanted to be a good disciple of my teacher, or I wanted to be better practitioner than others. I found it's not simply a Buddhist problem, but it's my psychological problem. That means when my body was broken and I couldn't practice, when I did in my 20s, so I couldn't be a good boy of my parents, and I couldn't be a good boy as a Buddhist priest. That's why, I felt my life was really good for nothing. And so that was kind of very shocking to me. And I was in the process of dealing with this for a few months. And at the time I lived in a small apartment by myself, so there's no sangha, and I didn't need to any practice as a priest. I was just me. One day I found myself sitting alone, not as a practitioner within the sangha, or not as a Buddhist priest, in a kind of a social occupation. I really sat myself, and I found deep peace there. That means I don't need to be a good boy. I can be just sit. And I found that is really zazen that is good for nothing. But before that, I intellectually understood zazen is good for nothing as a Buddhist philosophy. but because of that, I felt my life is okay,
yes.
Meaningful. When I couldn't continue in that way, I felt my life is not valuable. But I found that is the ground we need to practice with that desire to be a good boy, in not only in the secular, mundane way, but even as a Buddhist. I became free from my desire to be a good Buddhist. Finally, I think first time I found the real meaning of zazen is good for nothing, or practice without expectation or gaining mind. So just be there with this body and mind. I was born in Japan and grown up and educated in Japan. And because my teacher asked me to come to America, I moved to America and have been practicing with American people for many years. Somehow, this practice is really good for nothing. Still, some people, it's strange, some people come to practice with me, this good for nothing thing. I really appreciate those people who are interested in good for nothing thing. So I really wanted to express my appreciation and gratitude that all the support and participation from all people, not only in this country, United States, but people come from Europe or South America and other people, other places. So I'd like to say thank you to all those people who are interested in this strange teaching and practice. As far as there are those people, this tradition continues. It took me a long time to become free from desire or expectation. So to me, that is doesn't good for nothing, or a practice without gaining mind is a very difficult koan. Because of that, I started to study around I was 30. I started to practice without any, expectation. I felt, I don't need to be a good boy. I know, I'm still a good boy in a sense. I'm not so bad. But when I felt I behave like a good boy, I can kind of make fun of me. I'm not caught up with my desire to be a good boy, but I see that is a problem. From the very beginning of Buddhist traditions, breathing is a very important point of meditation practice. In some traditions, they count the breath or they watch the breath. But in Dogen Zenji tradition, we don't count breath, we don't watch breath. Some people, even in Soto Zen tradition, they encourage their student. But at least in my lineage, Saaki Roshi, Uchiyama Roshi lineage, we don't watch breath, we don't count breath. We breathe as naturally as possible. But still, it's important to breathe abdominally. That means we breathe through our nose as if the air goes down to the abdomen. During the Zen or meditation, we make sure, when we are breathing, the stomach is moving. This is important to have a deep breath. That means air goes in our body. My teacher said this is important. Attention is always here, but it should go down here. My teacher says, sometimes or often meditation practice in Buddhism is a practice of concentration. We pay attention to one object to concentrate in order not to think or enter the world of thinking. But in our tradition, or just sitting, we don't even do that. That means there's no one object to concentration. But Uchiyama said our practice of just sitting is like driving a car. When we are driving a car and we pay one particular object, then it's dangerous. But when we drive a car, we have to, our mind should be everywhere, not only something in the car or something outside the car, but our mind is nowhere. Therefore, our mind can be everywhere. So something happened inside or outside, we can adjust. So that is awareness or awakening in our practice. Even when we sit in this way, our brain is still working. Our stomach is working and our heart is working. There's no reason, only our brain stopped working. And the function of our brain is produce thought. So in our zazen, thoughts are coming and going, and our practice is not stop that. When those thoughts coming and going became object of this person sitting, then our mind is separated into two parts. The thoughts that become an object, and this person is thinking about this thought. This thought become an object, and sometimes I like this idea, or I hate that idea, or I become angry about some memory. If we do such a thing, our mind is separated in two parts, subject and object. That is a problem. So that is what we call thinking. So when we find we are thinking, that means there's a separation between within our mind, subject and object. We stop that. That is what let go of thought means, or in my teacher's expression, opening the hand of thought. Thoughts are just coming and going. That is a natural function of our brain. But when we grasp it, then we are thinking. I'm thinking about this thought, whether it's right or wrong, or good or bad. I found I do this, then there are two sides. And when we found it, we open our hand and return to just sitting. Means deep breath and upright posture, and keep our eyes open. That means not sleep. When we are sleepy, we are dream. In this quiet condition, sleeping and awakening is not so clear. Often I think I'm waking, but somehow in my mind I'm dreaming, and I think I'm thinking. But that is very difficult condition. But whenever I found I'm sleeping or dreaming, I wake up to the soul. I make sure my eyes are open without seeing anything. So this upright posture, deep breath, and not sleeping, and letting go of thought. Those are the 4 points we return. But often we deviate from those 4 points. This is just sitting. But when we found we deviate from just sitting, we return to just sitting. That means posture, breathing, not sleeping, and letting go. That is what we do in our meditation practice. So actually this is not really meditation. Thoughts are coming and going, but we don't think. So our business in sitting facing the wall is keep returning to this posture, breathing, not sleeping and letting go. Yes, and this cannot be done without thinking. Stop thinking is another kind of thinking. So we don't even think not to stop, not thinking. But my teacher said this is done with our body, not with our mind. About his zazen, Dogen, the founder of Soto Zen tradition, called dropping off body and mind. Dropping off body and mind. That means we sit this body and this mind, but mind is empty. We don't try not to do anything with our mind. But so in our practice, body is really important. Keep this upright posture and returning to this posture and breathing. So mainly, zazen means sitting meditation. But Dogen often called this practice as sitting instead of meditation. For him, just sitting is dropping off. Dropping off means when we grasp, it stick. But when we open our hand, it's drop off. That means we become free from our clinging to our body and mind. Then this body and mind is only 5 skandhas, only collection of 5 skandhas. And that is the time when we are free from this clinging, when we open our hand. Then we see as a subject, but we become one with all beings. Things are coming and going, like air is coming in and going out. And if there is some sound coming and going. So nothing stays here. So these 5 skandhas really become emptiness. So our practice is not contemplating about emptiness as an object, but we become empty. 5 skandhas being 5 skandhas that are empty. That is our practice. That's why we cannot make sure, I attain that condition or stage. When we evaluate what is doing, then again there's a separation between subject and object. So our practice is without any evaluation or judgment. So that is another meaning of just sitting. When we sit, we don't really listen anything. We don't pay any attention. Even the birds are singing, and we are sitting. If I listen to their singing and thinking these are the birds, then it's not zazen anymore. Even when I do this, there's a separation between person sitting and the sound. There's a kind of an interesting koan story in Zen, and Dogen likes this. A teacher asked a student, pointing the wind bell. And the teacher asked, is the wind make sound? Or does the bell make sound? Then the student said, my mind makes sound. Neither wind nor bell, but my mind makes a sound. That means, when wind blows the wind bell, it makes the vibration. And that vibration of the air reaches to my ear, then it becomes sound. So before the vibration reaching my ear, there's no sound, right? Sound is only inside of our mind. I think that is why that the student said, my mind make the sound. But Dogen said that is not true. Because, even if my mind is working, if the wind doesn't blow and the wind bell doesn't, shake, and the air doesn't vibrate, then there's no sound. So all of them are making sound. That means this entire universe is making sound. So there's no subject who listen and no object or sound that is heard. That is what Dogen called it the total function. We are part of it. So there's no such person who is listening, no sound that come to me, but this entire world is making that sound through this person. And this person is only tiny part of it. And this is based on the basic Mahayana Buddhist teaching of interconnectedness. About time, when I studied Dogen's teachings, he talks about 3 kinds of time. One is, our common sense time that flows from past to the present and present to the future. And things are happening within this like a time flows, like a stream of time. And I was born at a certain time in the past, now I'm here, and at present, and sometime in the future I'm going to die. That is a common understanding of time. But Dogen said that is not only the way we can we understand the time. If we take a close look at time, we find this present moment is only actual time, because past has already gone, so it's not reality anymore, and the future has not yet come, so it's not reality yet. So only time is this present moment, and this present moment has no length. Even if there is a slightest length, then we can still cut into 2. And this part is already past, and that part is still in the future. So even though this present moment is only actual time, but it has no length. It's 0. So in this sense, time disappeared. Only just here. Even here, when I speak or think about here, still there's length. So this actual present moment cannot be the subject of our thinking. We can't feel it, But when we just be here, that means we stop thinking about the flow of the time and just being here and be one, just be here. Then we become one with the time that doesn't flow. That means from the beginningless beginning and to the endless end, this is one seamless moment. Time flows only in our thinking because of my memory about the past and my hope about the future. It seems time flows. But if we don't measure time, that means without human beings, from that moment of Big Bang until today, until now, this is one moment. There's no such segment. These segments are created by human thinking. That means fiction. So this first common sense idea of time is a fiction or created in our mind. But before human beings appeared on this planet, then There's no such, time flows. I call this eternity, time that doesn't flow. When I read Dogen's teaching, there are three kinds of time, or three ways of viewing the time or understanding the time. In the first kind of time, in common sense, my friend died almost 50 years ago. And he is existing or alive in my mind as his memory. And he is still alive. That means because of what he did to me or for me, I'm here and I'm doing this. If he didn't go to the temple and allowed me to read my teacher's book, I'm not here. So he is still alive in me. And also within this time which doesn't flow, we are always together. So that is how we understand, we are connected with not only my friend, but my teacher. Uchiyama Roshi died 1998, about 20 years ago. But when I felt Uchiyama Roshi is sitting with me. So time is kind of a very interesting thing. So Dogen, when he discussed about time, he said time can fly or move from future to the past, present to the past, not only from past to the future. Language is a problem in Buddhism, not only in Buddhism, in all human cultures. Especially in Buddhism, when Buddha awakened to the reality or Dharma, he had hesitation to teach, because it said he thought that truth or reality he discovered was too deep and too subtle, beyond human thinking. Therefore, there's no way to communicate with other people. Even he explained, no one could understand. So he said he thought it's easier for him to just be there by himself and quietly die. But somehow, the god, Indian god Brahma, came down and asked him to teach. I think that was a very difficult time for Buddha. In order to teach, he has to translate what he experienced into language. And that it took at least several weeks for him how to teach, how to express what he discovered using language. So it was a big challenge. And this challenge for Shakyamuni still continues today. What is the Dharma as reality, and what is the expression of Dharma or explanation of Dharma using language? When we study even Buddhist sutras, we are thinking using discriminating mind, and we think using concept and logics. That is how our brain works. Otherwise, we don't understand what is said. Often, this written teaching or written expression of the reality is called a finger in Zen tradition. Finger that point the moon. So the real thing is not finger, but the moon. But often we think about the finger. So it's really a challenge for all Buddhists. How can we see the moon instead of finger? Often Zen masters, without explaining using was concept and logics. Their famous teaching method is hitting, shouting, and speaking something nonsense. That is to help their student to become free from their conceptual thinking. That is one part of very important Zen teaching. But Dogen has, in a sense, very unique Zen master. For him, expressing the Dharma using language is very important. He said, when we experience something, unless it is expressed using language, you didn't really experience it. So language, expression using language is really important. That makes our understanding also clear. So Dogen and another very well-known Soto Zen monk, whose name was Ryokan, he was also famous as a poet and calligrapher. Ryokan said, finger is also a moon, or finger is a part of the moon. In Dogen's tradition, language is really important. So that's why, his writing, like a Shobo Genzo, is really difficult. He can ignore even grammar, or customary expression, habitual way of thinking, or he changed even the saying or expression appeared in the sutras or Zen master's sayings. So he, in order to use language as an expression of reality itself, his way of reading, thinking, and writing is very creative. That's why his writing was so difficult for us, because unless we understand what he experienced, what he tried to express, just reading his words doesn't make sense at all. Practice the same thing or with him. I think that means in his case, or in our case, practice zazen and experience what he experienced. It's really important to understand his language. And when we share the same experience, we see the language is actual expression of what we experience, same as Dogen. Sonomama is, I don't think sonomama is such a simple word or a simple thing. Sonomama is just as it is before being observed by human beings, before human beings appear in this world. That is sonomama. But when human beings appeared and become an observer of things happening, human beings create some thinking, and that is not sonomama. That is a copy of sonomama, copy of the reality, using our thinking. So our thinking is like a screen, and we create a copy of the reality, and we think that is not sonomama, but that is a kind of a fabrication. So it becomes a kind of a complicated. And yet, when we think of human life, having this screen, living with the ability to make the copy of reality is reality. That is our life as it is. So we cannot say if we stop creating the screen, then we become one with sonomama. Then it's another fiction. So sonomama before human beings and sonomama as a human life should be integrated. That means we as a human beings, we are living with our ability to think. That means to produce something artificial. And we need to know that that production is not reality as it is. But we have to live with this ability of creating something fictitious. That is human life as it is. So it's really complicated in a sense. And so we have to see all those three aspects of sonomama. And somehow we need to go back and forth. That means we sometimes or often we negate our fiction, but we also negate about negation of the fiction. Otherwise, we lose us as it isness as human life. So this is same as reality and language.
Yes.
If we negate language, then there is no way to live as a human beings. So we have to include or back and forth that language or thinking is not as it is. And yet, without this, there's no such things called as it is. So our life is not so simple. Of course, as a Buddhist, Zen is a part of Mahayana Buddhism. We take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Those are basically I don't know if love is a good word or not, but in a sense that is love. And Dogen says, Buddha is a good teacher, and Dharma, Buddha's teaching, is good medicine, and Sangha is good friends that help us, each other, to recover the health, mental health. Those are the three most valuable things for all Buddhists. But those, according to Dogen, those three are not really three different things. But Buddha, as Dharmakaya or Dharma body, is this entire universe, entire reality. And Dharma is how all beings are within this entire universe or entire network of interdependent origination. And all beings within that interconnectedness are Sangha. As a religion called Buddhism, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha means Shakyamuni and his teaching and people who study what Buddha taught. According to Dogen, those are not only way to see those three treasures, but this entire universe in which we are living, and how that is Buddha, and how those things are existing, that is interconnectedness, that is Dharma, and all beings existing within this interconnectedness are Sangha. So actually this is what we love and we trust. I think very basis of Mahayana Buddhist teaching is interconnectedness, because we are, each beings are empty. That means lack of self-nature, that is independent entity. We cannot be independent entity. We can live or exist within interconnectedness. That means we are supported by all beings, not only people, but we are supported by air, water, and everything. There's no way to live without gratitude, because we can live based on support by all beings. Without support by all beings, we cannot live, even exist. Our thinking is very ego-centered, but this ego-centered way of thinking can be because of the support by others. Even our language, in my case Japanese, is a gift from the Japanese society or tradition. Japanese people lived in that islands, had been developing the language, and because I was born, somehow, I was given Japanese language as a gift. And I used the Japanese language to create a very ego-centered idea. So even our egocentricity is a product of interdependence. So we cannot live without gratitude, appreciation to all beings in which we are living together. I think the basis of forgiveness is repentance. In a Bodhisattva practice in Mahayana teachings, vow and repentance should be always together. Vow, we take 4 Bodhisattva vows. Being numberless, we vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, we vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them or master them. And Buddha's way is unsurpassable, we vow to realize it. Those are 4 Bodhisattva vows. So all Mahayana Buddhists need to take those 4 vows. And yet those 4 vows are really endless vows. That means there's no time we can say, I have accomplished all those 4 vows. There's no way to completely fulfill those vows. That means our practice is always incomplete, no matter how many years, how long we practiced. So the another side of practice based on our Bodhisattva vow is repentance. And repentance is not something negative. It's not something like, I'm sorry I made such and such mistake, and I try not to make another mistake. But rather, repentance is awareness of how incomplete we are. So as far as we practice based on vow, we have to practice repentance as awareness. And this, because of this repentance or awareness of incompleteness, it's kind of natural if other people make mistake, and I cannot judge they are bad. I'm right, because there's a kind of a famous saying by Prince Shohaku, who was almost the first Japanese person who studied Buddhism in the 6th century. And he said, what I think right might be wrong with other people, and what they think right is not right to me. Both of us might be wrong. So we are both ordinary deluded human beings. So that I think that awareness that we are not complete, perfect person is a ground of forgiveness. I think vow is not something we think and we promise, I do such and such thing. But the vow, at least those 4 Bodhisattva vows, is based on the way we are within the network of interdependent origination. Because we are living together with all beings, we have to live based on that reality. And yet that is very difficult to understand and see in our way of thinking. That's why we need those vows. Those vows are not, how can I say, came from our thinking. That's why, in order to in order not to be deceived by our thinking that is always self-centered, I think we need vow as a part of interconnectedness. We need to vow to live on that reality or foundation. But our thinking is always deviate from that reality. For all of us, me is most important than others. Others are not so important, like me, myself. That is a kind of a natural thing in our thinking. In order to put more value on that reality, fundamental reality, than my thinking, my personal view, personal limited habitual way of thinking. I think that is why we need vow. Well, religion is a kind of a tricky word. Uchiyama said, I don't like religion. In a kind of a common sense, religion is something we have to believe, even though it's difficult to believe. Let me talk about what religion in Japanese means. The equivalent Japanese word for religion is shukyo. Shu literally means basic truth or reality, and kyo is teaching. Originally, shukyo is a Buddhist word. That means the reality Buddha awakened to, and Buddha's teaching, the basic reality and about the teaching about that reality. That is the definition of what shukyo means. And this word shukyo is used as an equivalent of English word religion. And religion means to be connected with God again, right? To recover the connection. So religion and Japanese word shukyo are two different things. And yet, we use as an equivalent. That is kind of a problem. When Uchiyama Roshi talks about religion, he's thinking about shukyo. That is basic reality and teaching about that reality. Importance of religion or shukyo in these modern times is we need to awake to that fundamental reality in which we are living together with all beings. And how we need to think how we can live without, in a sense, destroying the interconnectedness, or destroying or injured. But modern civilization, destroy that or injured the interconnectedness. We don't mind about some living beings cease to be if we are happy, or to make our life more convenient or materially abundant and enjoyable. We don't mind about other living beings. I think that is injuring or even destroying this interconnectedness. So to do so, to awake, that is a problem, or the problem of modern civilization or material civilization. We need to wake up or awaken to that basic reality and try to live that reality. If that is religion, or if that is shukyo, then shukyo is, I think, most important thing for us modern people. But in that sense, religion is not some kind of doctrine, system of doctrine we have to believe without thinking. It's not an institution. Yeah, awareness or awakening and practice based on that awakening, how we are. Ritual is important, especially in the monastic practice. It's almost everything is rituals, and that is a expression of our awareness of basic reality that we live together with others in harmony. How can we express this awakening through our body and mind, how through our actions or how to use our body. So almost everything in the monastic practice is rituals, and somehow I didn't like it. It's too much formal, and within the long history of that kind of traditional monastic life, ritual becomes simply or empty forms. The spirit is not there. Especially the monks who live there for many years, they can do things based on that form, rituals or formalities, without thinking or without put themselves in that formality. So somehow I didn't like monastic practice. It's become really meaningless forms. But ritual is, I think, still important. When we awake to the fundamental reality, we are living together with others, and our wish to live with others in harmony, we have to show our gratitude or appreciation to others. And in a sense, not really monastic, but community life is a kind of a miniature of this network of interdependent origination. So we live together and help each other and support each other. But because we can be very egocentric, so we can injure each other or harm each other. So it's important to express our gratitude and appreciation to others. To do so, we need some expression using language or how to use our body. And some rituals, such as making prostration, or in Buddhist tradition we do Kosho. This Kosho and bow. This I think this gesture, I think, is the same as a Western culture as a shaking hand. That is, when we put these two palms together, we cannot hide anything. That means we cannot hide weapon. So this gesture shows I have no intention to harm you. And from this position, we cannot attack the person in front of me unless we do something, one action, then the person can escape. So this means I have no intention to attack or injure or harm you. So this is an expression of friendship and respect and intimacy with the person. And another way of making prostration is much more polite way of expression. I think that came from the way slaves or servants showed their gratitude to their Lord. That means when we make prostration, in that case we have to put our both hands, both elbows and forehead on the ground. That means we cannot attack at all. We cannot do anything. But the person in front of you, standing, can do anything. It's really vulnerable posture. But so without a perfect kind of surrender or obeisance, we cannot take this posture. And we do this in front of Buddha. That means, and we hold our hands palm up like this. That means we place Buddha's feet on our hands and that is higher than our head. Our head is the highest point of ourselves. But this posture means I put Buddha higher than myself. This is a kind of expression of I completely take refuge in Buddha and Buddha's teaching. And we do the same posture or prostration in front of our teachers. So this is a ritual, but this is the expression of respect and taking refuge. But unless we are careful, we can do this without thinking. That's just a habitual, greeting. So our mind is, or heart, in the form is really important. Form and mind or heart should be together. Otherwise, this simply just form is not so meaningful. Important point, I think, is face the question. When young people have a question about their lives or about how people live in the society, this question is very precious. And try to find the answer to that question. And try to find if there are some people or person or people who seems, how can I say, be the answer to that question. So some predecessor as a teacher or example is important. Otherwise, the people who have such questions become a kind of negative against the society. So I think that is important to find, to deeply understand the question.
Yes.
And find the example if that person or people who had the same question and found some way they could live positively. About a teacher, Dogen Zenji said, without true teacher, it's better not to practice. So having a true teacher, finding a true teacher is most important thing. And to me, Uchiyama Roshi, my teacher, was a true teacher, and I was really fortunate from the very beginning. I found a good teacher. Dogen says it's important to have a true teacher, and I thought my Uchiyama Roshi was a true teacher. But Uchiyama Roshi said, I'm not a true teacher. I cannot be a true teacher. True teacher is your zazen. No human beings can be absolutely true teacher. All human beings are simply ordinary beings. That is one thing he said. So true teacher is the Dharma and Buddha and our practice. No human beings can be true teacher. That is one thing he said. And another side he said, as a human beings, true teacher is a person who don't say, I am true teacher. I make no mistakes, so you have to follow everything I say. You have to believe everything I teach. But you should see this is an ordinary human being, so it might make mistakes. And for him, that is true teacher. The true teacher should not think he is true teacher. So I think there is both identity and disidentity. Yeah. That is very important point. He didn't attach himself to become or to be a true teacher. But he is always humble. And he always say, I cannot do this, and I cannot be always correct. And that is fine. But to teach that all human beings are limited is true teaching. I cannot say in general, but in my case, when I was in confusion, I have many questions about life. as an example, Uchiyama shows how to live as a way seekers. I think to me that was most deepest service I received, most deepest offerings human beings can do. Of course, there are so many good things to do, and that is all good. But to show the deep meaning of life, or how we are within interconnectedness, and show it as an actual concrete example, I think that was most or deepest offering one person can do. In Buddhist traditions, awakening or awareness to the reality we are living together, all beings, and live based on that reality, I think is most healthy way of life. So I hope this tradition, based on living based on that awakening to the reality, and also become mature to live in that way, I think is what Mahayana Buddhist teaching is all about. So I hope this way of life continued in the future. As far as there are some people live in such a way, then Buddha's teaching is alive. I don't care so much about the Buddhism as a institution, whether or even the name of the word, name of Buddhism. But if people live without become Buddhist, if they live in that way, that is fine. So my mission is to transmit and continue this tradition. But if people in the future think they don't need such a religion called Buddhism, that is fine. But I hope those people can see that reality and live together with all beings.